My best friend thought he stole my business, but I secretly contacted all my clients. The partnership agreement I signed 15 years ago meant nothing when it counted. My name is Robert Mitchell, 44 years old, real estate agent with 16 years in the business. I had built my client list from nothing, worked nights and weekends to become one of the top producers in the Boston luxury market until my so-called best friend and business partner decided I was dispensable, just another obstacle in his path to greater success. Alex Donovan and I met during our sophomore year at Boston University, both struggling business majors with big dreams and student loan debt. We clicked immediately, staying up late planning our futures over cheap beer and takeout pizza in our cramped apartment. Even then, Alex had that magnetic personality that drew people in, tall, confident, with a booming laugh and the ability to make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. I was more reserved, analytical, the one who remembered details and made sure plans actually materialized. Where he was flash, I was substance. It seemed like the perfect balance. When we graduated in 2008 during the worst housing crash in decades, other graduates were fleeing the real estate market, but we saw opportunity in the chaos. We made a pact over a bottle of cheap champagne in our empty apartment. We would stick together, build something lasting. Mitchell Donovan, Alex said, clinking his plastic cup against mine. It sounds like a law firm. People will trust us with their biggest investments. He was the charismatic one, all smiles and firm handshakes, while I was the detail guy, the one who remembered names, anniversary dates, children's colleges, and exactly what kind of property each client dreamed of owning. In 2010, after 2 years of working for a larger agency and living on ramen noodles to save every penny, we scraped together enough money to open Mitchell Donovan Realty, a small office in Back Bay with just one assistant between us. Our furniture was secondhand, our technology outdated, but our enthusiasm was boundless. Those early years were tough, working 14-hour days, splitting commission checks that barely covered our expenses, learning the hard lessons of entrepreneurship through trial and error. But we built something solid brick by brick, referral by referral, until we had 15 agents working under us, a sleek downtown office with harbor views, and a reputation as the go-to team for luxury properties in Boston's competitive market. Our friendship seemed unbreakable throughout it all. Weekend fishing trips on Alex's boat, bought after our first $1 million year, family vacations where our kids grew up together, building sandcastles on Cape Cod beaches, holidays spent at each other's homes with our wives trading recipes and inside jokes. I was godfather to his son Tyler. He was best man at my wedding to Carol, giving a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. When people talked about successful partnerships in the industry, they mentioned us in the same breath, as if we were one entity. Mitchell Donovan, the dream team who understood Boston real estate better than anyone else. I should have seen the warning signs over the past year, the subtle changes in Alex's behavior that, looking back, were red flags waving in front of my oblivious face. The closed-door meetings I wasn't invited to join, the new friendship with James Westfield from Boston Capital Investments, the way certain high-end clients suddenly worked exclusively with Alex instead of me. There were the unexplained absences, the vague explanations, the slight distancing in our personal relationship. Carol noticed before I did, asking casually one night over dinner if everything was okay between Alex and me. I dismissed her concerns. Just busy with the Hampton property development, I said, believing my own excuse. We're both under pressure. But I trusted him completely, never questioning his decisions or motives. That was my first mistake, one born from 15 years of friendship and the belief that our partnership was as solid as the historic brick buildings we sold. The morning it happened was ordinary in every way, a crisp October Tuesday with leaves swirling around the streets of Back Bay. I arrived at the office at 7:30 as usual, coffee in hand, mentally reviewing my talking points for my 9 o'clock meeting with the Gardners, a couple looking to upgrade to a waterfront property in Seaport District. When I tried to badge in, my key card was declined. The little light flashed red instead of green, an electronic rejection that made no sense. Thinking it was a system error, I called Alex, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I texted Melissa, our office manager, who usually arrived early. 5 minutes later, she appeared at the glass doors, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and pity that made my stomach drop before she even spoke. "I'm so sorry, Robert," she said, as she let me in, her voice barely above a whisper, even though we were the only ones there. "I thought Alex had told you already." "Told me what?" I asked, the coffee turning cold in my hand as I stood in the reception area that suddenly felt foreign despite the familiar logo on the wall. Our logo, the one we designed together over pizza and beer all those years ago. "There's been a restructuring," she said, her eyes darting away from mine. "Alex has merged the company with Boston Capital. They're rebranding as Donovan Luxury Properties, effective immediately." I laughed, actually laughed out loud, thinking it was some kind of elaborate joke or test. Alex and I were equal partners, 50-50, our signatures side by side on every important document. He couldn't make that kind of decision unilaterally. But Melissa's expression didn't change. If anything, her discomfort deepened. She handed me an envelope containing a letter on unfamiliar letterhead, Donovan Luxury Properties, with a sleek new logo that erased any trace of my name. The words seemed to blur before my eyes as I tried to comprehend what was happening. "According to the partnership dissolution agreement, you've been given a severance of 3 months' salary," she explained, her voice professional but strained. "Your personal items have been packed up." She gestured to a cardboard box sitting by her desk with my awards, family photos, and desk plant hastily thrown together like discarded mementos. "Alex asked me to tell you he'll call later to explain everything in detail." The world tilted on its axis. I steadied myself against the reception desk, the marble countertop cool under my suddenly clammy palms. "This isn't legal," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "We're equal partners. He can't just—" "The lawyers say he can," Melissa replied quietly. "Apparently there was a clause in your agreement about corporate restructuring in the event of external investment. I don't know the details, Robert. I'm just the messenger. And I'm really sorry. This wasn't my decision." I picked up the box with mechanical motions while my mind raced through possibilities, denials, and the dawning horror that this was actually happening. 15 years of friendship destroyed, our partnership dissolved, without even a conversation. My livelihood stripped away between one day and the next. When I reached my office, or what used to be my office, the nameplate was already gone. The door open to reveal freshly painted walls and new furniture being moved in. A young man I'd never seen before, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, was directing movers where to place an expensive-looking desk made of glass and chrome, nothing like the traditional mahogany desk I'd chosen years ago. As I stood there frozen in disbelief, my phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin, one of our newer agents, a talented young woman I'd personally mentored. "Robert, what's going on? We just got an email that you're leaving and the company is rebranding. Meeting at 10 to discuss transition. Is everything okay?" Leaving. That was the official story being circulated. I was abandoning ship, not being thrown overboard. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only was I being forced out of my own company, but the narrative was being controlled to make it seem like my choice. I walked out, without speaking to anyone else, the box of possessions heavy in my arms. 16 years in the business, reduced to a few mementos, and a plant already wilting from neglect. The drive home was a blur of autumn colors and traffic lights, my body on autopilot, while my mind raced through scenarios and questions. How had Alex managed this? What had I missed? What clause in our agreement had I failed to understand? I parked in my driveway and sat staring at our colonial home, the one Alex had helped us find 7 years ago, negotiating with the seller personally as a favor, unable to make myself go inside and tell Carol what had happened. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, alternating between disbelief, rage, and a crushing sense of betrayal that made it difficult to sleep or eat. I made fruitless calls to 3 different attorneys who all said variations of the same thing. The partnership agreement I'd signed so many years ago without proper legal review, another mistake born of trust, contained language that made this restructuring technically legal, though morally reprehensible. Alex had found a loophole and driven a truck through it, with the help of expensive lawyers from Boston Capital, who had likely been planning this for months. He took everything, I told Carol, on the 3rd night, as we sat on our deck, overlooking the small Japanese garden we'd planted together, the autumn air crisp around us. My clients, my reputation, access to all our listings, the company name, everything we built together. Not everything, she said quietly, her hand steady on mine, despite the anger I knew she felt on my behalf. Carol had never been Alex's biggest fan, her instincts sharper than mine when it came to people's true characters. He didn't take your knowledge, your relationships, or your integrity. Her words hung in the air as I stared into my untouched glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light from the outdoor lanterns. Integrity seemed cold comfort against the loss of my livelihood, the betrayal of my friend, the theft of my professional identity. But something else she'd said resonated in a different way: relationships. In real estate, everything was about relationships. I'd spent 16 years building them, nurturing them, remembering details about clients' lives that went far beyond transaction details. I knew which clients had children with peanut allergies, which ones collected vintage wines, which ones valued privacy over views. Those relationships were real, built on trust and service, not company letterhead or office location. The next morning I woke with a clarity that had eluded me for days. The fog of betrayal had lifted, replaced by a cold determination I hadn't felt since those early hungry years of building the business. I showered, dressed in my best suit, a charcoal Tom Ford that Carol had insisted I buy to look the part for luxury clients, and sat down at my home office computer with purpose. I wasn't as technologically savvy as some of the younger agents, but I'd always been methodical and cautious, especially when it came to client information. Opening my password-protected external hard drive, I found what I was looking for: my backup client database, meticulously maintained for years. Every quarter for the past decade, I'd exported our complete client list with contact information, transaction history, property preferences, and personal notes. It was just good business practice, I told myself, a precaution against system failures or cyber attacks. But now, it represented something else entirely: my professional survival. The most recent backup was just 3 weeks old, containing detailed information on over 800 past clients, including the 200 or so I considered my personal book of business. People I'd worked with directly, built relationships with over years of transactions, coffee meetings, housewarmings, and market updates. These weren't just names and numbers to me. They were the Hendersons who needed a home with an elevator after Mr. Henderson's stroke, the Jacobsons who bought investment properties for each of their 3 children's college funds, the Winstons who downsized from their family home of 30 years, a process that had been as emotional as it was financial. I knew their stories, their needs, their trust. I called my attorney again, this time with a specific question. If I contact my former clients to let them know I've established a new business, is that legal? As long as you don't disparage your former company or violate any non-compete clause, yes, it's perfectly legal, he confirmed, after reviewing my partnership agreement again. Those relationships belong to you. not the company, especially if you were their direct agent. Just be careful about how you phrase things. Next, I called a commercial real estate colleague who owed me a favor after I'd helped his daughter buy her first condo at below market rate. Tom, I need a small office space, something professional but not too expensive, and I need it yesterday. Within 48 hours, I had secured a modest office in a well-maintained brownstone, just 2 blocks from my former location, made calls to set up the basic infrastructure for a new business, and registered Mitchell Real Estate Advisors LLC as my new company. I had some savings that would cover startup costs for a few months, but I needed to move quickly before Alex solidified his relationships with my clients, or worse, started spreading narratives about my departure that could damage my reputation. The first call was the hardest. My fingers hesitated over the number for James and Sarah Keller, clients who had bought and sold 4 properties with me over the past decade, becoming friends in the process. What would I say? How would I explain without sounding bitter or unprofessional? I took a deep breath and dialed, reminding myself that authenticity had always been my strength. "Robert," Sarah answered warmly, her familiar voice instantly calming my nerves. "I was just thinking about you. We got the strangest email yesterday saying you'd left Mitchell Donovan to pursue other opportunities. It didn't sound like you at all." Relief flooded through me. "That's actually why I'm calling, Sarah. I wanted to let you know personally that I've established my own boutique agency. I value our relationship too much to let you hear it from someone else." Well, thank goodness. We were worried when that email came from someone we'd never heard of. Honestly, it felt off. "Tell me everything. What happened? Are you okay?" I navigated the conversation carefully, emphasizing my new venture rather than dwelling on Alex's betrayal, keeping the focus on the future rather than the painful recent past. By the end of our 15-minute call, the Kellers had already promised to list their vacation property with me once my new business was fully operational, and asked for the address to send referrals. "We wouldn't work with anyone else, Robert. You know that," James said before hanging up. The next dozen calls followed a similar pattern: surprise at the abrupt change, concern for my well-being, and ultimately support for my new direction. One by one, I reached out to my core clients, the people I'd built real relationships with over the years. By the end of the week, I'd spoken to nearly 50 of them, and the response was overwhelming. As it turned out, clients didn't care about fancy office space or company branding nearly as much as they cared about trust, expertise, and personal service, things Alex had never fully understood or valued. Within 2 weeks, I had secured commitments from over 40 clients to work with my new agency once it was operational. I hired Melissa, who had quit Mitchell Donovan, now Donovan Luxury Properties, in protest after witnessing how I'd been treated, and 2 junior agents who followed her lead, uncomfortable with the cutthroat atmosphere Alex and his new partners were creating. We set up a streamlined office focused on personalized service rather than flash, investing in top-tier technology rather than expensive furniture or artwork. The first listing came from the Gardners, the very clients I'd been scheduled to meet the morning of Alex's betrayal. They signed with me despite Alex's team offering to cut their commission by a full percentage point, a desperate move that told me volumes about how things were going at the newly merged company. As the weeks passed, more listings followed. More buyers sought me out specifically, and word spread through Boston's close-knit luxury real estate community that Robert Mitchell was back, independent, and focusing on quality over quantity. I never mentioned Alex's name in these conversations, never disparaged my former company or partner, simply focused on providing exceptional service with a more personalized approach than larger agencies could offer. I let my work and my integrity speak for themselves. The results were beyond my expectations. By the 3-month mark, Mitchell Real Estate Advisors had secured over $30 million in listings and closed nearly $15 million in sales. The business was not just surviving, but thriving, built on relationships that had withstood the test of betrayal. It was Carol, who showed me the article in Boston Business Journal 6 months after I'd been forced out, sliding her tablet across the breakfast table one Sunday morning. Donovan Luxury, properties facing financial difficulties. Amid agent exodus and client complaints, the headline read. The piece detailed how the merged company was struggling with integration problems, high overhead costs from their lavish new offices, and most significantly, client retention issues. The reporter had done their homework, noting that nearly 80% of the clients I had personally worked with had followed me to my new agency. The article also mentioned cultural clashes between the original Mitchell Donovan agents and the more aggressive Boston Capital team. A week later, I received an unexpected text from Alex, the first communication since his promised call that never came. Can we meet? Need to talk about a potential solution to this situation that could benefit us both. I showed Carol the message over dinner. What are you going to do? She asked, watching my face carefully. Nothing, I replied, deleting the message without a second thought. There's nothing to discuss. The following month, I moved Mitchell Real Estate Advisors into a beautiful corner office in one of Boston's historic buildings on Commonwealth Avenue. Smaller than my old space, but with character and warmth that reflected my business philosophy. The exposed brick walls, original hardwood floors, and large windows created an atmosphere that felt both professional and welcoming, exactly the image I wanted to project. I hired 3 more agents, all experienced professionals who valued relationships over transactions, and we continued to grow steadily, deliberately focusing on quality service rather than empire building. Alex's company lasted another 4 months before being acquired by a national chain at a fraction of its potential value. I heard through industry contacts that he'd taken a mid-level management position in their commercial division. His name removed from the company he'd sacrificed everything to control. The irony wasn't lost on me. In his quest to become bigger, to eliminate me from the equation, he'd ultimately lost the very thing he'd sought, control of his own destiny. 1 year to the day after being locked out of my former office, I hosted a small gathering for my team and their families in our new space. As I looked around at the people who had taken a chance on my vision, clients who had become friends, agents who shared my values, I realized something important. Sometimes losing what you thought you needed clears the path for what you actually deserved. My new business was smaller than Mitchell Donovan had been at its peak, but it was more profitable, more satisfying, and completely mine. I never spoke to Alex again, though I occasionally saw him at industry events around the city. We would nod politely and move in opposite directions, like strangers with a vague connection, rather than former best friends who had once shared everything from apartments to dreams. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, no vindication in my success. Those emotions had faded over time, replaced by something closer to gratitude for the lesson his betrayal had taught me. Business partnerships, like friendships, are only as strong as their foundations, and sometimes what looks like an ending is merely a painful but necessary redirection. When new agents ask me the secret to my success, and they do, especially after Mitchell Real Estate Advisors was named Boutique Agency of the Year by Boston Magazine, I don't mention backup drives, client lists, or competitive strategies. I tell them something simpler, more fundamental. Build relationships, not transactions. Remember that you're helping people with one of the most important decisions of their lives, and never forget that your reputation is built one client at a time. It wasn't the empire Alex and I had once dreamed of building together, sketching floor plans on napkins in our college apartment. But it was something more valuable, something entirely mine, something no one could ever take away again. A business built on relationships, honest service, and the quiet satisfaction of doing things the right way. In the end, Alex hadn't stolen my business at all. He'd simply freed me to build a better one.